I would like to start this crisis that we are witnessing right now impact all of us. And for this time, this moment in time like this social distancing and often lack of human contact is essentially important to bring our communities together. This is how the idea of the EdTech event emerged. We see a huge impact. We saw it on the financial sector. We discussed about the impact on the education sector that has an impact is something that I'm very familiar with also because as a mother of 3 daughters still in school. I'm very keen to introduce to our next session with Gillian Cribbs. She'll be talking about personal resilience in times of crisis. This is a topic that is very close to my heart, and it's also one that I feel it's increasingly relevant in a time like this. But before we start, I would like to give all of you a short background on this event and why I think it's extremely important. I'm sure that all of you are here because in one way or another, you resonate with the idea of finding your strengths during difficult times. Recently, I read a wonderful article on how great leaders are forged during times of crisis. This is something that I myself also believe in. And it's my hope that this panel, this discussion with Gillian, will help you to provide some insight on this subject. If it's okay with everyone, I would like to share a personal experience of mine, and it won't be long. It's a few minutes, but it was during 9/11. During 9/11, I was actually working in New York at Standard Chartered as a trader in emerging markets. And back then, I was working in the World Trade Center, the Tower 7, and the first tower that collapsed. And I still remember that day, 9/11. I was working in the office as usual when the first attack happened. I remember it was a bright day and a lot of people commuting to work. And I worked and I was living actually in a flat that was opposite of the World Trade Center towers. And I was trading when the plane hit. And I was very lucky because just as I got out of the building, I saw the second plane hit and everything started falling. And at this point, I didn't know where to go. I couldn't even go home because my apartment was facing the towers. I was homeless. I was lost with very little money, and I had no family in New York. My husband was in Paris working. For about 20 hours after 9/11, my family even thought that I was dead. They couldn't contact me. And what I had, however, was this team of Standard Chartered. During that time, we were together. So what I want to say is that after the attack, we were put in a rescue office. There were not many computers, no telephones. We had to roll out our sleeves and rebuild our office. We went together buying crayons, papers, more tools to build something new and something new for the team. Our office was something that we felt good to be in. We worked differently. And the spirit of this team was phenomenal. 1 year later, our team was awarded. We were awarded for the best team on Wall Street. And this is something I was very proud of because all of us really worked very hard to achieve that. When I look back at that time, it was one of the hardest part of my life, but where I received the warmest support from my family and friends, and also where I learned so much more. The one thing and the one key takeaways from it, of course, we are not comparing this crisis that we are going through with what I have experienced with 9/11, of course not. But there are things that we learn and we love to share. We can share. What times are difficult is tough, but you are really learning so much more. Secondly, I learned that one way to navigate through tough time is to never feel the fear of change. Humans are creatures of routine, and many of us fear change, one way or another. However, the ability to actually is key, is the ability to adapt, which is very key, very key to actually survive. This is something I like to call the entrepreneur mindset. What makes us a good entrepreneur is his or her ability to adapt. And lastly, I discovered that it's absolutely possible for you to rebuild yourself after a crisis. But it's also through crisis that you reinvent yourself and find the best opportunities for you. So this is why I've decided, and I really great pleasure for me, very, very well. I'm usually looking forward to have a talk with Gillian. I've known Gillian for years, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome her with us and to join me now. Thank you very much for your time, for listening, and let's welcome Gillian with us.
Hello, Traman. Thank you very much for that introduction. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you. So just reflecting on what you were saying there, Traman, sharing your unique experience. Actually, crisis and trauma are a great predictor and indicators of leadership. So people who have been through a crisis and recover tend to become more effective leaders. So in many ways, although this is very difficult for everybody, this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic we're going through, it is actually what we call a crucible experience. It's a pressurizing experience, but we will emerge from this stronger, leading ourselves, leading our teams, and leading our organizations. So that's one ray of hope in all this tough situation, and you absolutely confirm that from your experience, Traman. Thank you.
No, thanks very much, Gillian. I treasure, your insight very much. Gillian, currently, just so that everybody knows who is Gillian, I would love to introduce you to Gillian. Gillian currently coaches CEOs, senior leaders, board members, and organizations, and she teaches at London Business School, Said Business School, University of Oxford. She's on our board at CFTE and knows very well both the theory and the practice of personal and professional development. She's a fantastic person, and I cannot think of anyone better suited for to be giving this discussion than her. And so I would like to ask, I know a lot of people will be asking you questions, but I have a few questions I would love to ask you. And the first question I would like to ask you is, in this time of crisis that we are going through, you coach a lot of CEOs, board members, and senior leaders. You see a lot. And as a CEO, what are the CEOs thinking right now? What are they thinking today? How do they react?
Well, it's interesting. It depends on sector, it depends on person, it depends on organization. So of the CEOs that I've been working with now, actually, for those in fintech, it's proving to be an interesting opportunity for them. They are not necessarily expanding, some are contracting a little. In the financial sector, some financial services groups are doing quite well. Others are finding it quite tough, being quite constrained. So it really all depends on the sector, the individual, and the organization. But we are in uncharted waters. This is unprecedented in our time. So any CEO will have to be looking either to experts or looking to their top team, and this will be a great test of their top teams and of their leadership. So it's really, I think the history of this will be written afterwards. We'll probably see a great flurry of books and insight after this. So we don't quite know what all the lessons are, but the people I'm working with is pretty steady. But make no mistake, this is a huge social, economic, and financial crisis, probably the biggest of our generation, biggest since the last world wars.
No, thanks, Gillian. Please, I'm asking the audience, if you have any questions, please, feel free to share with us, because I'll be very happy to pick up some of your questions. And I'm sure Gillian will be very happy to answer them with you. So what can managers do for their teams right now? And what's your take on that?
Well, I think there are sort of four layers to look at here, or maybe, yes, 4 layers. So if we look at the global situation, we started with CEOs. So the CEOs will be looking outwards to the landscape, what is happening, what the Federal Reserve's doing, what the different national banks are doing. They'll be looking to their sector, what their competitors are doing, and they'll be looking at their own business and their talent and their leadership. We can look at what individual leaders are doing internally, and then we can look at managers and how they're managing their team. We can look at individuals and how they're managing themselves. I would like to start from the top, actually, if I may, because this is a great time of opportunity as well as crisis. So for many leaders, they will be called to step forward and take decisive action. It does bring out the best in leaders. What we need right now are transformational leaders. A bit like entrepreneurs, transformational leaders are very courageous. They take action, they drive change. They can be very visionary and change agents, rather than transactional leaders who just manage the shop, if you like. And there's a lot of there are a lot of steps that leaders are taking now. So I wanted to talk about 7 things that CEOs might do to navigate this crisis. But I also want to make the point that leaders are not just the CEOs in an organization. You can have leaders at any level in an organization. So for those who are senior leaders, senior managing divisions, managing big teams, managing functions, for you, this is an opportunity to step up, to step in and to seize an opportunity. So I'd kind of like to talk to that layer of leaders as well and say, look, this can be a career-defining moment for you. So what is it that you can do beyond your home team? What contribution can you make to your part of the business or your organization? And it does start with getting your own house in order. So if you'll bear with me, I think let's build this up in some sort of logical block. So when it starts to looking after yourself, and this applies to you if you're an individual contributor, or if you're managing a team, or if you're managing a business, or even if you're a CEO, first of all, you've got to lead yourself and look after yourself. That means managing your emotional and psychological responses to this. I do a lot of work on the emotional and psychological level. I'm an organizational psychologist. That's my training as a coach. And what happens when we have a crisis is we go inwards, we find a safe place. Either that's our team, as you said, Traman, in 9/11, or we go to our family. And in a sense, that's what we're all doing in lockdown, of many countries, and people are in lockdown now. We go back to our group. Now, it's natural to feel shocked and stressed by what's happening. It's unprecedented in our lifetimes. None of us quite know how to cope. I think there are 2 shocks here. There's the shock of the virus and what it can potentially do to us. It can kill us, let's face it. I mean, it's serious. The fact that this is happening and has closed down a fifth, I think it's, a huge part of the world's population is now under lockdown. So it's natural to have anxiety. It's natural to have concern. And we have to honor that and reflect on that. But if we let those feelings run unchecked, if we let them get out of control, if we start watching the news obsessively, if we start reading about epidemiology, if we just try to stop becoming an expert in this, we will drive ourselves literally insane. So fear narrows our vision, our field of vision, and it makes us hard to get back on our feet and see the real task at hand. So try to control that, try to manage that fear, and try not to get distracted by too many websites, trying to do too many things. Set yourself some focus. The focus will bring some real help and stability, rather than allowing our mental health to undermine us and drain ourselves. So my own research was on 9/11, and I followed the American Psychological Association's guidance on this. First thing you have to do to stabilize is look after your body. Good nutrition, good sleep, good hydration, exercise if you can every day, and don't turn to alcohol. These are things that really drag you down, or other sort of recreational drugs. Then we have to look after our mind and manage that so it doesn't run astray. We have to get out of this survival mode, feeling that we're under threat, closing down. So try to keep things in perspective, stay hopeful, talk to people, connect with people, seek help, and practice something of reflection, mindfulness, prayer, meditation. There's lots of apps, there's lots of things on the web for that. So first of all, get yourself ready. Now, really important to structure yourself and your work at home. Try, for those of you with children, it's really hard because you've got young children to homeschool. There are a lot of distractions. First thing, try and minimize these distractions. Try and set a nice place for you to work. Establish common hours where you're all working together, studying, and stay focused on the tasks. I think it's really important you've got the right tech in place, so ask for some help for that. And the next step is to set some real goals and boundaries. So get dressed, set daily tasks and goals, stick to a schedule, and know when to stop work, know when to step away from the desk and go and refresh yourself. Go and get some fresh air, head out of the window if it has to be, but a walk if you're lucky enough to go for a walk. And think about having core hours when you're working. Really important to communicate with your boss, sharing information, and also try and seek some social connection. Treman, you mentioned about connecting with your peers after 9/11, your team. Managers have to do this, but reach out to your friends, reach out to teammates, stay in the conversation, and stay connected, keep communicating.
It's very valuable. Thank you, Gillian. So very good. All
of that is really stabilizing yourself, whether you're a leader, a CEO and manager, and I'm sure that a lot of senior people have been through this kind of coaching, and we'll have some notes on this for you afterwards so you can sort of follow this. But if you're a manager, you're very responsible for other people as well. So this is where you've got a double responsibility.
Actually, we do have a question on that.
Okay.
And I think I see a question from Juliet. What do leaders think their employees' followers are looking for?
That's a really good one, and I was going to cover a lot of that in. Are we talking about the CEO here, Julia, or are we talking about the a manager? If you're managing a small team of 6 or 7, which one are you thinking of, or is it the same?
I think we could do the CEO, and then after that, those who are managing smaller teams. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's go to the top then. Just to frame this a little, because I like to frame things. We are in what's called a Vuca environment. I don't know if people have heard of this, but Vuca stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And this is a term that was coined by the US military after the end of the Cold War to describe the kind of threats, the emerging threats to world stability. So they were looking at guerrilla wars, terrorism, cyber warfare, and a pandemic, which is now shutting down the global economy. And in a VUCA environment, there are certain things that leaders need to do and demonstrate, which I'll talk through. The difficulty with this is that although as a leadership coach, I've been talking to leaders for many years about, VUCA, this VUCA environment is just a very, very speeded up version of change. So you could apply it to the financial services sector, which through fintech is destabilizing. The standard, the financial banking is is going through this Vuca environment, this uncertain, complex and ambiguous change. They haven't really listened. And in fact, I was working in Europe just before the lockdown started in many European countries, saying that leaders do need to anticipate the coronavirus is actually a Vuca environment coming at you, and they didn't really connect, they didn't really think it through. So I said, well, look, as the crisis is coming, these are the things I think you should be thinking about. First and foremost, a leader has to be authentic, know who they are, what their values are, what their strengths and limitations are. What I mean by this is, it's no good being on the stage and trying to pretend, trying to be something you're not being transparent. Now, for those leaders who've relied on an image rather than a strong, authentic, rather than showing who they really are, this is going to be a very challenging time. And you might see leaders disappear or crumble or just not be who you think they are. I look at Richard Branson, for instance, who was always held up at business schools as an example of great leadership. Well, where has Richard Branson been, and what has he been doing? He was supposed to be authentic. He was supposed to be a great leader. I haven't seen much or heard much from him throughout this. So you have to know where you're strong, know who you are, know where you need support, and know what your values are. And I think for many leaders who've not spent time in reflection, understanding who they are, that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. We need to follow leaders that we trust, that we relate to, that we understand, and that we value, who are role models for us. We need someone inspiring. It's interesting, Chaman, my own research was into 9/11 when I read organizational psychology, and the leader I studied absolutely embodied this sense of authentic leadership. And he said that good leadership is the one thing people run to during tough times. And in hard times, you discover things about yourself that you'd never discover in normal times. He had to become something other, something bigger, something greater. So you can see the challenge there, can't you?
Yeah. I'm glad you are mentioning about the report that, it's a very good report on 9/11 where you shared, and perhaps you can talk a little bit more about this, but I wanted to, and this is very much in continuation of what you just shared. What do you see, and what would be your views on better use this time as a crisis moment, as an opportunity to actually step up as a leader? What's your views?
Yes, this is a really good point, Traman, because for all of you out there as managers or leaders, this is a moment for you to step up. And I think first among this, the first thing you need to do is understand and grasp the context. So what's actually going on, and how do you manage that in your part of the business? So how do you find information? How do you manage your boss? How do you manage your team? How do you manage your peers? How do you go beyond your remit? So really reading the context. So for example, I was talking to somebody in a tech organization the other week who wanted to step up, who really wanted to step up, who had a real idea of doing something more philanthropic. And I said, well, now's your moment. Now you can do it. What is your organization doing that's related to philanthropy? And this manager didn't know. And I said, well, go and find out. Join a tribe or start a tribe. Go and join a group and make it happen. Because really seizing the opportunity to contribute is what leaders do. Some organizations don't actually use the word leadership, which is interesting. They use the word contribution. So they say, if you're a leader, if you're contributing something positive and useful, you're a leader by default. You don't need the title, you don't need the name. And having the courage to speak up once you've identified something that needs to be done. So if I, for example, if I were now working, I don't know, in one of the banks, the big banks in this country, I'd say, let's be the first mover. We need to be the first mover to go and show our support for small businesses. We need to do that proactively, and we need to make that happen really quickly. Then we'll still a march on our competition. So real leaders act and do something positive for the benefit of the organization in a time of crisis. And it can be a career-defining moment, this, or a career-limiting moment. I was talking to a CEO the other day who said he is watching to see who steps up and who doesn't.
Yes.
And that also requires you to influence beyond your team or your division. Yeah.
Thanks, Gillian. I see there are questions. I would like people to ask questions. I see quite a lot, and one question that comes quite a lot, and we discuss people in this time of change start to think a lot, and they do a step back.
Yeah.
And I see question: should we change jobs in a recession? What do you think?
That's a very, very good question, because one of the things I've heard from my clients is that they are really reevaluating everything to do with their life right now. And this is a good thing. This is a very important thing to do. Hopefully you've got a bit of extra time because you're not commuting. Hopefully you're not working as hard as before this happened. So take the time to stop and reevaluate your life. And I would say, think about rebooting yourself somehow. Is this job matching where you want to be in life? Is this what you really love doing and want to do? Is there a moment or an opportunity here to say, actually, I really need to think about the direction my life is going in, and changing by 1 or 2 degrees could really set you on a different path. I think this is the great hidden opportunity of this crisis, actually, because we're all being forced to wind down in a way over a period of a couple of months. And when do we ever get that opportunity? Perhaps at holidays, perhaps when we take time off. We never really get the time to stop and think about what's important. So I think, yes, recessions, well, we don't know how we're going to emerge from this. I know GDP is going to be very badly affected. The economy is shut. Many national economies are shut down. But I would say, you know, take some time to reflect, go within, and think about, you know, how this has affected you, and how perhaps you've grown as a result of this struggle. What have you done? Have you had to learn different ways of doing things? Have you found yourself to be more efficient? Have you reconnected with your family and friends? Are you volunteering in the community? Are you learning different things about yourself? So I think it's a great question.
I see a question, and I'll share it with you. As many employees are currently on furlough, what are your thoughts on this post-COVID? Will work ethics decrease? And if so, how can managers manage their employees during furlough to keep up morale?
How can managers keep employees' morale up during the furlough? Yes. It's great we've come on to managers, because I think if you're a manager, you've got to ask yourself, what does my team need from me right now? What's going to help them in this crisis? And what kind of approach do I need? Now, you will know your own teams. So what do they need? An injection of optimism and positive thought. Positivity and hope and optimism are absolutely the things that are going to get us through this. And with, you know, our Prime Minister here, whether you love him or you loathe him, one thing he has got in spades is optimism. And that's what I think we're feeling the loss of right now, that huge sense of optimism. Or do they need some quiet calm? Do they need you to bring calm to the situation? Some empathy, understanding, some one-to-one time? Or do they just need some dogged perseverance to say, look, you know, keep going, keep at it, we will get through this? In practical terms, what I think managers all need to do is to agree how you're going to work together. So make sure every team member is clear about how you're going to work remotely. Show them the big picture from time to time. They need to see the big picture of what's going on. Set expectations about and trust your team. So let them get on with their job. Make sure you know what they want them to do, but let them get on. Have a virtual huddle. This is a nice one, a daily virtual huddle. The importance of connectivity, you know, connect with people, make sure that they feel included, and try to keep up this rhythm of one-to-one meetings and team meetings, which really maintains a sense of structure and community. That's what's important.
No, that's great. Yes.
Help foster well-being, and, you know, make sure that there's some free time in your agenda to talk to people if they need to reach out. Yeah.
Thanks, Gillian. I have two more questions. I know time goes by so fast. And the first one will be, what, and this is coming from someone in the audience, what should leaders not do during this crisis, or managers not do during this crisis?
Ah, that's a great question. I don't know if you remember after 9/11, but George Bush disappeared, didn't he? And I know he had to go to his bunker and make sure he was safe, but he disappeared, and that spooked. I think that spooked a lot of people. So fortunately, other people like Giuliani stepped in, other leaders step in. We're seeing that with our Prime Minister now. He's disappeared through no fault of his own. But what they shouldn't do is be absent. They should not, so they should not deny people information. They should not try to cover things up. So transparency is very important. So not being truthful, not being direct, not being present, not being empathic as well, because actually emotional intelligence and intuition is really important, because leadership, when it boils down to it, leadership is very personal. And people remember the personal connection. If you're an impersonal, robotic, detached, absent leader who's not sharing information, who's not leveling with people, you will not last. This is not a time to be talking about numbers. It's not a time to be talking about plans and business. And it's not a time to be a superhero. You need to show some vulnerability, because that gives people the opportunity to help and support you. So you can't sit alone.
Yes. My last question, because my last question would be, I love this question because I know you have lots of ideas. What do you would recommend as a book to everyone about leadership, perhaps about crisis? I'd love to share, you know, the paper research that you did, and we will do, but what kind of books, what should we read as leaders or even as people in this time of crisis?
Well, interestingly, one of my dear friends who works for the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative at Harvard University, I've known for 10 years, maybe longer, 15, 13 years. I last saw in December, and he with his colleagues has wrote a book called You're It, which is about crisis change and how to lead when it matters most. It's a very interesting book, because he's saying, you are the person that people rely on, whether you're a CEO, a team leader, a father, a brother, a community leader, it doesn't matter. There are moments of when you are it and people are looking to you. Now, you could be it because of your title, or you could be it because people trust you, but it's a great book. And it looks at actually how it's very prescient, because it looks at how you might lead through a pandemic. The other book is that everybody knows about, I guess, is Black Swan, which is by Talib Nassim, I think. And he wrote about this concept that just because we don't see something, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Double negatives there, but the black swan is the image for the thing that we'd never seen before, therefore we never thought it was going to happen. Interestingly, he's written a follow-up to that book called Anti-Fragile.
I didn't know about this one.
Which is a book I think came out in 2018. And Anti-Fragile talks about the power, how things that have endured are likely to endure crises. So really old established companies, old industries can sometimes see through the newer competitors. So that might be a good, so he says that often there's a lot of fragility in organizations when we have an economic collapse. So what is the opposite of fragility? He called it anti-fragility. And that is principles, organizations, people who endure through crisis and lead beyond it.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Gillian, I really, really enjoy. I think a lot of people enjoyed, your views and your insight. I know it's a very large topic. I mean, we can talk, for more and more. There are lots of things that we can speak on, but I really appreciate your time. I know that you are very busy. So thanks very much for spending time with us.